Hi, this is Matthew. I'm a trainer for UPSC Civil Service Examination, and this channel is providing free tutorials for the aspirants who are preparing for the very same examination. This is going to be the second video regarding the subject world history. Even though UPSC is asking us to study world history from 18th century onwards, but the study of world history should always start from this topic called European Renaissance. You need not have to go into detail since it is out of syllabus, but you should have a basic understanding about European Renaissance, Enlightenment, and Romanticism since you are studying world history. Okay, so we will start from the very scratch itself. First of all, let us have an understanding, a very basic understanding regarding the term and definition associated with Renaissance. The literal meaning of Renaissance is rebirth. Okay, the literal meaning of Renaissance, it simply means rebirth. But if you try to understand its definition, try to search for the definitions of Renaissance, you will get plenty of it. Okay, but the most favorite of mine is given here. Uh, it goes like this: Renaissance could be defined as the revival of Greco-Roman spirit of scientific inquiry. Okay, uh, I bet that most of you have not been able to comprehend this definition, and hence I decided to explain this process, okay, in a layman's perspective. Okay. So basically, Renaissance is actually a socio-cultural process. Okay, Renaissance was actually a socio-cultural process that actually enabled the humankind, okay, to step into the modern era. Okay, but but at the ground level, what happened also is a matter of interest. Okay, um, I will be discussing, okay, about the things that actually happened in association with Renaissance at the ground level. Almost all the societies and major civilizations of the modern world had gone through this socio-cultural phenomena called Renaissance. Okay, so when we study any society, any civilization, okay, with respect to Renaissance, we can come to a conclusion that two things are evident if a society goes through Renaissance. Number one, a considerably high number of individuals in that society will experience some sort of mental expansion. Okay, they will experience some sort of mental expansion, which then enable them to become receptive to new ideas. Okay, they became willing to adopt changes due to the incoming of these new ideas. The second phenomena that is common to all societies is that due to the mental expansion experienced by a high number of individuals, a creative spirit, a newfound energy could be also found in these societies when they traversed through this process. Okay, and many different societies used this creative energy and creative spirit and energy differently. Okay, for example, the European society, the West, they utilize this creative spirit and this newfound energy due to this Renaissance in a very creative manner, be it sea explorations and discoveries, or enlightenment, or Protestant Reformation, or development of science. All originated, or all the later phenomena drew their energy from this process called Renaissance. The Indian society also witnessed the socio-cultural phenomena, and that happened in 19th century. Okay, Indians also experienced some sort of mental expansion. We changed our society, religion, politics, etc., and as a result of that, a newfound energy and a creative spirit was also could be found in Indian society during 19th century. But we never had the luxury to channelize this energy into creative things like enlightenment or scientific development. On the other hand, we were, crippled due to the evil rule of British Empire in India. So the entire energy, the entire creative spirit created by Renaissance was used by the Indians to overthrow the British rule. So which means had there been no Renaissance, there would have been no international movement or freedom struggle in South Asia. So this is Renaissance. If you speak in a layman's perspective, okay, if you, for the common people, this was actually Renaissance. Okay, and for Europe, this sort of mental expansion was created due to a renewed interest in the, ancient Greek and Roman literature as well as wisdom. Okay, that actually stipulated this mental expansion in European society. And this socio-cultural phenomena could be observed in European civilization from late 14th century onwards. Now, I'm taking the luxury to go much more deeper into this subject, okay, this process called Renaissance. Okay, first of all, we will have a detailed analysis about the factors that actually led to the mental expansion to, considerable high number of European individuals during 14th and 15th century. And for that, I have to take you guys back to the 15th century Europe or the late 14th century Europe. Okay, so the Europeans themselves classified their medieval period as dark ages because they were crippled by an oppressive system called feudalism. Okay. During medieval period, almost all aspects of human life was determined and dominated by an oppressive system called feudalism. Okay. Feudalism is characterized by the presence of a few landed aristocrats, okay, who led a very luxurious life at the expense of common population or common people. Okay. The common people, they were only left their resources to common people were only bare minimum in order to meet their subsistence needs. All their surplus were extracted by these landed aristocrats so that they could lead a highly luxurious life. And this feudalism began to appear in European civilization by around 5th century CE or AD. And the decline of the Roman Empire was the fundamental factor for the emergence of feudalism in Europe. Okay, so whatever it may be, the European civilization was affected by this oppressive system for almost 1,000 years. Okay, so by 14th century, the discontent towards this system was quite high. Okay, people were quite highly oppressed. Normally, when people find their life so harder, they usually look to religion for comfort. Okay, they try to seek refuge in religion if life gets harder. But an interesting feature for the European civilization during the medieval period was that the religion itself was the biggest oppressor. The religion, the Roman Catholic Church, was the biggest feudal lord during medieval period. Okay, so the population was oppressed by both the political as well as the religious elite. The church was the biggest feudal lord. In many states, church possessed not less than 2/5 of the total land. Okay, so the land was the most precious resource during medieval period. Okay, so the people were left with bare minimum in order to meet just their subsistence needs. Okay. In spite of these difficulties, if you want to change, if you want to overthrow that system, then you should have the control over knowledge. See, knowledge is a very powerful tool, okay, to change our lives. But unfortunately, for the common European man, okay, he never had that luxury also. Okay, knowledge which was capable enough to change that oppressive system was made a monopoly by the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, see here, you should understand a very basic reality. Okay, sponsoring education, okay, giving patronage to knowledge is actually a very costly business. Okay, that is the case even in 15th century or in the 21st century. Okay, sponsoring education, giving patronage to education and scholars is actually a costly business. After the decline of Roman Empire, and especially after the emergence of Islam, the glory of the Europe was vanished. Okay, and the European states were not that prosperous during medieval period. So the only institution that was capable enough to support or to sponsor education was the Roman Catholic Church, and that church was the biggest feudal lord in Europe during that point of time. Okay, imparting education through Latin language actually helped the church to monopolize their control over knowledge. Okay, there is an interesting information with respect to these incidents. You might be heard about the term vernacular. Okay, the literal meaning of vernacular is actually vulgar. The church characterized the languages like Spanish or French or English, which was the common languages, which was the languages of the common people, as vulgar. The church considered these languages as vulgar, and church insisted that these languages were not fit to impart education. Okay, so the economic capacity as well as making Latin the instrument of education helped the church to monopolize knowledge. Okay, the people. Okay, church was a quite oppressive institution during that point of time. The people were, forced to follow the line of thoughts of the church. Anyone who deviated from the teachings of the church, anyone who tried to change the system by revolting against the teaching of the church, was actually dealt with very high-handedness. Okay, the church had initiated a program called Inquisition, which became quite notorious. Okay, where people were tortured to fall back in line. So the life of the common man during medieval period was quite struggling and harsh. Okay, due to the aforesaid situation and problems. Okay, and it was in this scenario that a new knowledge, a new literature, and a new set of scholars who possess that knowledge and literature came to Europe during 15th century. Okay, and the church, it had no control over these scholars or this literature or this knowledge. Not only that, this new literature began to spread like wildfire in Europe by around the 15th century. And it was the spread of this new knowledge that actually created some sort of mental expansion to European people. Okay, remember that this knowledge was new to, this knowledge was not under the control of church, and apart from that, this knowledge began to spread like wildfire, and this created some sort of mental expansion in European societies during from late 14th century onwards. Instead of moving ahead, I am taking the luxury, okay, to take you back to the ancient Greece. Okay, because the Western civilization, as we know today, it all started from the ancient Greece. Okay, so if I have to tell you guys about the new knowledge that appeared in the 15th century, then you should have a basic understanding about the ancient Greece and Rome as well. Okay, see, the European civilization as we know today, it all started from the ancient Greece. Okay, the city states, okay, of the ancient period, which produced the great Socrates, Plato, Alexander, etc., is actually the foundation of the modern European civilization or the modern Western civilization. But remember that just 50 years after the death of Alexander, the entire Greek cities, the entire Greek lands became victims to Roman imperialism. Okay, the mighty Roman armies conquered the Greek lands and they annexed the entire Greece into Roman Empire. Okay, but the Romans, they never destroyed that glorious Greek civilization. On the contrary, they embraced that Greek civilization and the knowledge created by that civilization. And keeping that ancient Greek civilization as a base, Romans built their own civilization. So the civilization, the Roman civilization could be, okay, due to that, the Roman civilization could be called as a Greco-Roman civilization. Okay, due to the material as well as the intellectual property achieved by that civilization, the Roman Empire, okay, began to expand tremendously. The Mediterranean Sea was in fact converted as a Roman lake. Okay, the land across the Mediterranean was colonized by the Romans. Okay, be Spain, okay, the regions from Spain to Greece or from Turkey to Morocco, all were a part of the Roman Empire. So by around 3rd century CE, okay, it became quite difficult to rule this enormous empire, okay, from a single place. So the Roman rulers, they decided to create two headquarters for this vast empire. One was located at Rome, and the second headquarters was created at Constantinople, okay, the modern day Istanbul. Later on, these two headquarters emerged as two different dynasties and two different empires as well. Okay, the Western Roman Empire based in Rome and the Eastern Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire based in Constantinople. Okay, by around 4th century CE, okay, by around 4th century CE, this Western Roman Empire, okay, this Western Roman Empire got destroyed due to the invasion of various restive tribes. Okay, the Romans characterized these restive tribes as barbarians. Okay, because these people, okay, they had no unified religion, they had not developed any sufficient proper state system, and they had not developed the art of writing as well. Okay, as a result of all these factors, Romans described these restive tribes as barbarians. Anyhow, by 4th century CE, the mighty Western Roman Empire got destroyed by the series of invasions by these barbaric tribes. Okay, and again, remember the point I discussed just earlier. Giving patronage to knowledge, giving patronage to scholars is actually a costly business. So these Greco-Roman scholars who possessed this Greco-Roman knowledge, they migrated to Constantinople. Okay, because the barbarians, they had not developed the art of writing. So paper for them was actually a material, was just a material to cast fire, and they were not in a position to give patronage to these Greco-Roman scholars. On the other hand, Eastern Roman Empire was a part and parcel of this Western civilization, and they were quite rich as well. So seeking patronage, seeking safety, the Greco-Roman scholars who were centered around Rome, they migrated to the city of Constantinople. Okay, but by late 14th century, this Byzantine Empire began to decline. Okay, due to the pressure of the Ottoman Turks. By 1453, the invasions of Ottoman Turks, they completely destroyed this empire, this Byzantine Empire or this Eastern Roman Empire. Okay. And the Turks, they were quite hostile to these Europeans due to religious reasons. You might be heard about the crusades, etc. Okay, so due to all those previous incidents, the Turks were quite hostile to these Europeans, and the Turks, they had their own civilization and their own literature and knowledge. So this the scholars who possess vast ancient literature and ancient wisdom, they they came back to Europe by 15th century seeking patronage. Okay, and not only that, okay, so these Greco-Roman scholars, okay, who had this vast literature and who possessed this ancient wisdom, they came back to Europe. So this was the knowledge that actually came to Europe in 15th century. Okay, this was the knowledge that actually created some sort of mental expansion to Europe. Apart, okay, simultaneously, another interesting feature, an interesting development occurred in Europe. That was the invention of printing press by the legendary Gutenberg. So what happened here was, when at the time when this Greco-Roman literature, which was not under the control of Roman Catholic Church, when it was coming to Europe, printing press was creating a revolution. Printing press was actually the 15th century social media or the internet. Okay, so in knowledge, again, I'm stressing on this point. Okay, in knowledge which was not under the control of Roman Catholic Church came to Europe. Not only that, this knowledge began to spread like wildfire due to the invention of printing press. Okay, due to the invention of printing press, instead of the time taken to create a single textbook, earlier, it was the period of manuscripts. People were writing with their own hands to create textbooks. Okay, the invention of printing press increased the speed at which a book could be created. Okay, so as a result of that, this ancient Greco-Roman literature began to spread like wildfire in the European society, and the access to that literature, access to that knowledge, which was not under the control of the church, actually created mental expansion to European societies, and this phenomena is studied as European Renaissance. Okay, I think I have given a very sincere effort, okay, a detailed effort to give a layman's perspective regarding Renaissance. Okay. And since we discussed about this Greco-Roman literature, I would also like to give some insight about this ancient knowledge, okay, created by the ancient Greek and Roman civilization. Okay. See, the first thing was, the ancient Greek or Romans, they never attached any sanctity to poverty, just because they were fond of material pleasure. But that was not. But that was not the case during medieval period in Europe. Okay, the church had sanctified poverty. Okay, the teaching of the church was that the more you poorer, more you are closer to the God. Poverty was considered as a virtue by the church during medieval period. Okay, but that was not the teachings, that was not the knowledge, that was not the teachings that would be found in the ancient Greco-Roman literature. And this people who created this literature, they were fond of free spirit as well. Okay, if you look into the life of the ancient Greek or Romans, we can come to a conclusion that they were the advocates of free spirit. Okay, even enormous, sexual freedom was enjoyed by the people of ancient Greek or Roman civilization. On the other hand, on the contrary, the church was promoting a discipline in a very harsh manner. Church was quite obsessed with the concept called personal discipline. Okay, then one of the quality of the ancient Roman or Greek civilization was that they undertook sincere missions or attempts to end the misery of human life. Okay, but during the Middle Ages, due to the influence of the church, much emphasis was not given to end the misery of human life. Okay, okay, because that was not because the European economy was not in a situation to to bring people out of poverty. So the religion during that point of time emphasized on afterlife. Okay, they taught that you need not have to worry about the poverty of the the present life. Okay, even if you are poor in this life, a grand afterlife is awaiting you. Okay, so you should be content with the prospect of a grand afterlife. Okay, so basically I'm giving an understanding about the difference of opinion, difference a difference of opinion as well as a difference of perception of both the Latin literature as well as the ancient Greco-Roman literature. Then, this ancient Greco-Roman literature that came to Europe by around 15th century, it was pagan in nature. Pagan simply means, polytheistic. Okay, Hinduism is actually a pagan religion. Okay, because it is polytheistic in nature. See, one of the quality of the pagan civilization or the pagan literature is that it accepts multiplicity of viewpoint. Okay, it is not the case with the Semitic religion. Okay, Semitic religion is actually quite almost all the Semitic religion, be it be Judaism or Islam or Christianity, they are quite narrow-minded in their thinking. Okay, they are of the viewpoint that their religions are the only true religion. Their God is the only true God. Okay, I don't have any personal, objection towards that viewpoint. Everyone is free to have their own viewpoints. But one, problem with that mindset is that it will negate the scientific temper in the society. Okay. On the contrary, an advantage of the pagan literature or the pagan civilization is that it will accept multiplicity of viewpoint and it will stipulate some sort of scientific temper. Okay, so again, just remember the definition of Renaissance which I put in this slide. Okay, revival of Greco-Roman spirit of scientific inquiry. Okay, why the ancient Greeks and Romans had some sort of scientific inquiry? Because they were the products of a pagan civilization. The Greek civilization was entirely a pagan civilization. Roman civilization, till the time of the Emperor Constantine, they were also a pagan civilization. It was only after the time period of Constantine, Christianity became a prominent religion in Roman Empire or in Roman civilization. Okay. So, since I have discussed all these points, I could take it as granted that you had got a sufficient understanding about this wonderful socio-cultural process called Renaissance. Basically, we are speaking about a great degree of mental expansion happened to a high number of individuals. Okay. Now let us move forward. Okay, now we can move forward. I am not going to drag you guys to the previous centuries. Okay, now we can move forward. See, Italy is considered as the birthplace of Renaissance. Okay, especially the city of Florence. Okay, the city of Florence is considered as the birthplace of Renaissance. The reason why Italy emerged as the birthplace of Renaissance was basically quite simple. See, during medieval period, the Italian city-states were quite wealthy. Okay. Italy enjoy a geographical advantage, just like India. Okay, Italy is actually a peninsula which project outwards towards Mediterranean. As a result of that, Italy is actually a junction or a crossroad between the Middle East and Western Europe. Okay, and due to that geographical advantage, the Italians became engaged in trade, and it made them quite wealthy. Okay, the Italian city-states like Genoa or Venice had numerous wealthy merchants who benefited from the trade between Western Europe and Middle East. They were actually the middlemen in this trade, and and that trade gave them enormous wealth as well. Again, I'm coming back to the previous point I discussed. See, giving patronage to art, giving patronage to scholars, giving patronage to knowledge is actually a costly business. So when the Greco-Romans scholars, when they were fleeing, okay, they understood that the Italian merchants could give them patronage. Okay, and the only group that could give patronage to these scholars were the Italian merchants and the Italian city-states. And apart from that, we should not skip an interesting, point also. Okay, see, the Italians, they were the shadow of their past glory. Okay, even though they were wealthy, the city-states were quite wealthy enough. When you, consider the ancient Roman civilization of the Roman Empire, they were just a shadow of their past glory. Apart from that, they always lived in the memory of their past glory. Okay, so they, so receiving these ancient Greco-Roman scholars was euphoric to the Italians. They found euphoria in the wisdom and attitude of their forefathers. Okay, they became quite enthusiastic to spread this, ancient Greek or Roman wisdom. As a result of that, Italy became the birthplace of Renaissance, and from Italy, the socio-cultural process began to expand to the various other societies of Europe. Okay. So this is everything regarding Renaissance. And now I am again going to another analytical area. Okay, the effects of Renaissance. This would be more interesting for your examination. Okay. See, as I said, this tremendous energy and the creative spirit created by Renaissance was constructively utilized by the Europeans for the development of science, art, architecture, sea discoveries, etc. Okay, so for all these developments, we should actually give credit to the socio-cultural process called Renaissance. Then, by inspired by the free spirit of their ancient forefathers, there emerged a self-assertive individualism in the European society. Okay, this was actually the product of this is the influence of the materialism and the free spirit of their forefathers. Okay. Then, as I said earlier, in ancient Greek and Roman civilization, there were attempts to end human misery, okay, in the present life itself. Okay, and this actually inspired the Europeans of the 15th century. And as a result of that, a new branch of study called humanities began to appear, in the academic circle. And the concept called humanism began to influence the political discourse as well. Okay, so in the academic circle, a new branch of study began to emerge, and in the political discourse, this concept called humanism began to influence in a high degree. Okay, then the development of art and architecture. Okay, inspired by the ancient Greece and Roman civilization, the Europeans also, began to take sincere effort to make their cities and life beautiful. Okay, and it was basically a revivalistic tendency. They were trying to revive the ancient cultural and architectural glory. Okay, and the classical examples in that process would be, Da Vinci or Michelangelo. All these people were actually the products of this so-called Renaissance. Okay, since we discussed Da Vinci and Michelangelo, okay, just have a some understanding, some basic understanding, or an exposure, to be precise. Just have a basic exposure to some of the famous personalities who lived during this point of time in Europe, or these personalities could be considered as the products of Renaissance. Okay, first of all, Thomas More. Okay, he is the person who created the legendary textbook Utopia. Okay, then came William Shakespeare, okay, the famous English writer and poet. Then came the Copernicus. Copernicus was the person who proved the heliocentric theory. Before that, people actually believed that sun, moon, and the other celestial bodies revolved around Earth. That theory was challenged, and Copernicus proved that it is not the case. Sun, the planets actually revolve around the sun. So Copernicus, who propounded the heliocentric theory, was actually a product of Renaissance. Then Galileo, another important physicist and astronomer, who proved that Earth was actually, round. Okay, during medieval period, Church was of the opinion that the shape of the Earth is actually flat. Okay, and anyone who challenged that theory was persecuted. Okay, Galileo also faced the threat of persecution. Okay, and due to that, he had to change his viewpoint. Okay, and that's how the famous quote of Galileo emerged. And yet it moves. Okay, Galileo told that, okay, I am, changed my public stand regarding the shape of, Earth, but it doesn't matter. Okay, my opinion doesn't matter when it comes to reality. Okay, so that was and it became a famous quote. Okay, and yet it moves. That was the remark by Galileo when he was forced to change his opinion regarding the size of the earth. Isaac Newton, okay, who contributed tremendously to the development of science in Europe, okay, was actually a product of another important product of Renaissance. Michelangelo, Da Vinci, okay, all were the famous products of Renaissance. Then in the economical or in the political field, another important product of Renaissance was the destructive use of gunpowder. Okay, the development of science actually increased the potential of war or increased the potential of gunpowder. Okay. These are some of the things you should keep in mind. Okay, when you come across the term Renaissance. So since we discussed Renaissance, it is also important to have some basic understanding about another movement which is known by the name Protestant Reformation. Okay. For easiness, we can call it as simply Reformation. The Protestant Reformation was actually the first tangible expression of Renaissance. It was the first tangible expression of the mental expansion occurred to Europeans. Okay, Reformation was people usually confuse Renaissance as a religious reform movement. Okay, but that was not the case. Reformation found its expression in religious, political, intellectual, and in cultural fields. Okay, and as a result of that, we can rightly credit Reformation as a religious, political, intellectual, and cultural upheaval. Okay, uh, you know, basically it started against the actions and teachings, okay, of Roman Catholic Church. Okay, the church was going on with a notorious program called Inquisition, which tortured or even burned people to death who challenged the teachings of the church. Then there was a practice called indulgence. Indulgence in the Catholic theology, it simply means the actions prescribed by the church, okay, to decrease the effect of your sins. Okay, intelligence is as per Catholic theology, is actually the actions that should be performed by an individual, okay, to reduce the effect of his sin. But in medieval period, we can see that this intelligence was commercialized. Okay, if you're not willing to, okay, if you don't have the time to perform the act prescribed by the church, then you can basically pay the church. You can basically buy the indulgence. Okay, so buying this indulgence was supposed to reduce the effect of your sins. Okay, can you imagine? Then there was another practice or a concept called purgatory, which was propagated by the church. Purgatory, as per Catholic theology, is actually an intermediate place where the soul which is destined to heaven should go and should go through a purification ceremony. Okay, so these types of practices and teachings were quite common okay, in the religion of the continental Europe. So due to the mental expansion, people began to challenge these teachings and some of the actions of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, many people, okay, usually we consider, okay, Martin Luther, a German bishop, is considered as the father of Protestant Reformation. Okay, even though there were previously, even though there were other individuals who came before Martin Luther, like Erasmus, but it was a textbook, a work of Martin Luther titled 95 Theses, actually triggered or actually converted this Protestant Reformation into a movement. Okay, so Martin Luther, a German bishop, is actually considered as the father of Protestant Reformation. And Martin Luther was of the opinion that the Holy Bible and not the Pope should be the final authority when it comes to divine matters. Okay, and he also stressed on another concept, that salvation is actually a gift of God. Okay, but in medieval period, church was teaching that salvation was could be attained through meritorious actions. Okay, but Martin Luther challenged that position, okay, and claimed that no, as per Christianity, salvation is actually a gift of God. Your actions does not count when it comes to salvation. So this was basically a religious as well as a social reformation process, and we call it as Protestant Reformation. Okay, and later on, the followers of the Martin Luther and the followers of the church, okay, or the followers of the Martin Luther, they emerged as a different schism, and later on they emerged as a different sect as well within Christianity. Okay, Protestant Christianity at present is a different sect with, okay, it is not, and it is not associated with Roman Catholic Church. Okay, and if you want further examples, especially with regards to India, the Church of South India, the Church of North India, they are the prominent Protestant churches in India. Even India, we can see various sects, okay, within Christianity, be it the Roman Catholic Church or the Syrian churches, or Protestant churches. So when it comes to Protestantism, the CSI and the CNA are the prominent Protestant churches in Indian subcontinent. Okay. Since we discussed Martin Luther, you should also have some basic understanding regarding the major criticism pointed towards Martin Luther. Okay, and some of these criticisms are very serious enough to discuss in a class. Okay, that is the reason why I created a separate slide. Okay, to point out the criticism. Okay, of Martin Luther. Okay, see, Germany was actually the birthplace of Protestantism. Okay, Germany was the birthplace of Protestantism because it had some political element as well. Okay, the German princes, they preferred an independent church. Okay, because they considered the Pope as a foreigner. Pope was situated in Rome, and these German princes, they were supposed to pay an annual tribute to this foreigner Pope who was located in Italy. Okay. So this Protestantism actually benefited the German princes, as they were freed from paying annual tribute. Okay, so Martin Luther, he was actually a German bishop, so he faced strong resistance from Roman Catholic Church, and a German, kingdom called the Kingdom of Saxony gave asylum to Martin Luther. Okay, but while he was at the Kingdom of Saxony, the German farmers, they revolted due to the oppressive conditions. They were actually inspired by an important, teachings or an important, doctrine associated with Protestantism. Okay, Protestantism actually stood for the priesthood of all believers. Okay, this is a cardinal principle associated with Protestantism, priesthood of all believers. It found its expression in the political field as well. Okay, that's why the farmers, okay, the common farmers, the common peasants, they became quite inspired by this principle, and they tried to change that oppressive system, and they even took the banner of rebellion. So when the German farmers protested, when they raised the banner of rebellion, taking inspiration from the doctrine of Protestantism, which was the priesthood of all believers, Martin Luther decided to stand with the ruling class. He even described these protesting farmers as barking dogs. Okay, so this is actually a serious allegation. Then, the most important allegation pointed towards Martin Luther is that he is the person who actually sowed the seeds of anti-Semitism in Germany. Anti-Semitism simply means, hatred towards the Jews. Okay. Martin Luther had, in fact, come up with a book. Okay. He had, created. He was actually. He actually wrote a book titled "On Jews and Their Lies." In that textbook, he is actually calling for the persecution of Jews because they persecuted his Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, so these are some of important allegations, okay, pointed towards Martin Luther. And since we are discussing Renaissance and Protestant Reformation, please have a basic understanding about these also. See, the church was not a silent spectator. Okay, the church was not a silent spectator to these growing developments. Okay, Roman Catholic Church decided to counter the socio-cultural process called, or the socio-religious process called Reformation. They came up with another program called Counter Reformation. Counter Reformation was initially intended to challenge the Protestantism ideologically. Okay, the Jesuit missionaries, okay, was actually the product of this Counter Reformation. Okay, the Saint Savior, who was the patron saint of Goa, he was actually a Jesuit missionary. Okay, Jesuit missionaries even came to the court of Akbar and Jahangir. Okay, during the time of Akbar, these Jesuit missionaries, they even participated in religious debates at the Ibadat Khana. Okay, but unfortunately, in Europe, this counter reformation and reform Protestant reformation, it turned into a bloody religious conflict. Okay, the 30 years war, which resulted in the death of 8 million deaths, was actually the main reason for that was, the bloody conflict between these two schisms. Okay, then the French War of Religions, okay, which lasted for almost 36 years. Okay, and which resulted in the death of 3 million deaths, was actually a product of this religious conflict between these two schisms. And here I would like to stress one important and interesting point. See, this is the reason why the Europeans, they take secularism very seriously. Okay, they embrace secularism in its full spirit, because they actually saw the destruction that could be created by religious madness and religious enmity. Okay, and finally, due to these religious wars, they became fed up with religious enmity and dogmas associated with religions. That is the reason why, by around 18th and 19th century, secularism became a most important, doctrine or a principle in the political discourse of Europe. Okay, the people gave a strong voice. Okay, people gave a strong message that state should completely disassociated with religion. Okay, religion should be a personal matter, because they experience the worst thing that could happen. Okay, if religious hatred, you know, grow out of hand. Okay. So this is everything regarding, Renaissance and Reformation. I thank you for your patience and time. Okay, and if you want, any printed notes regarding all these areas, please feel free to mail to us. Okay, at easymains@gmail.com. Okay, so again, a big thank you.